The Arizona Territory had a way of testing people. The land was beautiful, but it was unforgiving. Endless deserts stretched beneath a burning sun, lonely mountains watched over scattered ranches, and every small frontier town carried stories of hardship, ambition, and survival. In a place where a person's name meant everything, one woman would discover that even family could become the source of the deepest betrayal. Evelyn Hartwell was 29 years old, a woman whose presence brought warmth to the quiet ranch she called home. With her long cherry-red hair, fair white skin, and gentle green eyes, Evelyn was known throughout the nearby settlements for her kindness. She was not the type of person who waited for life to become easier. She worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, caring for livestock, and helping keep her family's struggling ranch alive. After her mother passed away years earlier, Evelyn became the heart of the Hartwell Ranch. She carried responsibilities that most people her age never had to face. Yet she never complained. She believed that loyalty mattered, and she believed her father was still the man he used to be. But that belief slowly began to fade. Thomas Hartwell, her 56-year-old father, had once been respected as a hard-working ranch owner. Neighbors remembered him as a man with determination and pride. But after losing his wife, something inside him changed. Instead of facing his grief, Thomas searched for escape in gambling halls across the territory. At first, Evelyn noticed only small changes. Long nights away from home, missing money from the ranch supplies, promises that tomorrow would be different. Thomas always returned with the same words. "One more lucky hand, Evelyn. Then everything will be fixed." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the father who taught her how to ride horses and protect their land was still somewhere beneath the mistakes he was making. But every gamble took another piece of their future away. The ranch that once belonged to them began falling apart. Debts grew larger. Their cattle numbers decreased. Even the neighbors who once respected Thomas began whispering about his failures. Still, Evelyn stayed. She worked harder. She tried to save what remained. But she did not know that her father had already made a decision that would change her life forever. One evening, Thomas rode into town carrying the last of his money. He entered a crowded gambling hall filled with smoke, laughter, and men searching for fortune. Among them were powerful businessmen who controlled much of the area through fear and debt. Thomas believed he could win everything back. Instead, he lost. Every card turned against him. Every desperate bet pushed him closer to ruin. By midnight, he had nothing left. The men across the table demanded payment. They were not interested in excuses or promises. They wanted what Thomas owed them. "I'll find the money," Thomas said desperately. But the men only laughed. "You have nothing left, Hartwell." Thomas looked around the room, terrified of losing everything. His land was gone. His reputation was gone. His pride was already broken. And then he made the choice that would haunt him forever. He offered his own daughter as payment. The words left his mouth quietly, but they changed everything. The men accepted. When Evelyn learned what her father had done, she felt as if the entire world had collapsed beneath her feet. The person she trusted most had traded away her future to save himself. She looked at Thomas, searching for regret in his eyes. "Father, how could you?" But Thomas had no answer. Only shame. The next morning, Evelyn was taken away from the only home she had ever known. The men who claimed ownership over her treated her as if she were nothing more than a debt that had been transferred from one person to another. They brought her to a remote trading settlement where their influence controlled everything. The people there knew what these men were capable of, and fear kept them silent. Evelyn was chained outside an old wooden building as a cruel warning. The men wanted the entire town to see what happened when someone became trapped by their power. But even in that moment, Evelyn refused to break. Her hands trembled. Her heart was shattered. Yet she lifted her head. She was not property. She was not a debt. She was Evelyn Hartwell. And deep inside, she promised herself that one day she would walk away from those chains. Miles away from the settlement, another man was riding through the Arizona wilderness. His name was Caleb Walker. At 33 years old, Caleb was the kind of cowboy people noticed but rarely understood. He was handsome, with a rugged face, calm eyes, and the quiet strength of someone who had survived difficult years. He wore a worn brown leather coat, a dark vest, a faded shirt, and dusty boots that carried the marks of countless miles. Caleb lived alone. He had lost people he loved, and after those losses, he decided that keeping his distance from others was easier than risking another heartbreak. But fate had other plans. When Caleb arrived at the settlement searching for supplies, he saw something everyone else had chosen to ignore. A woman standing in chains. A woman who looked afraid, but not defeated. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt something he thought he had buried forever. The need to protect someone. He did not know her story yet. He did not know the danger waiting for him. But he knew one thing. No decent man could walk away. That night, while the settlement slept, Caleb made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. He would break those chains, and he would help Evelyn Hartwell find her freedom. The desert night was silent except for the sound of Caleb Walker's boots moving across the dry ground. The entire settlement slept beneath a blanket of darkness, unaware that the lonely cowboy they had ignored earlier was about to challenge the men who believed they controlled everything. Caleb had spent years avoiding trouble. He had learned that surviving the frontier often meant keeping your head down and walking away from other people's battles. But Evelyn Hartwell was different. When he saw her standing in chains, he did not see someone helpless. He saw someone who had been betrayed, someone who was still fighting even after the world had tried to take everything from her. Caleb approached the old wooden building where Evelyn was being held. The lanterns around the settlement flickered in the wind, casting long shadows across the empty streets. He knew the risk. The men who controlled the town were dangerous, and helping Evelyn would make him their enemy. But some choices were worth the cost. When Evelyn saw him approaching, fear crossed her face. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Caleb looked at the chains holding her in place. Because no one else was willing to do what was right. For a moment, Evelyn said nothing. She had spent days watching people look away. She had seen neighbors, travelers, and strangers pretend they did not notice her suffering. She had almost forgotten what kindness looked like. Caleb pulled out his tools and carefully worked on the lock. The process was slow and dangerous. Every sound seemed louder in the quiet night. Finally, the chains fell away. Evelyn stared at her freed hands, almost unable to believe what had happened. She was free. But Caleb knew their freedom would not last long if they stayed. "You need to leave," he said. "They will come looking." Evelyn looked toward the settlement one last time. This place had taken away her dignity, but she refused to let it take away her future. "I'm not running forever," she said quietly. Caleb noticed the strength in her voice. "You won't have to." Together, they disappeared into the darkness of the Arizona wilderness. Their escape was only the beginning. By sunrise, the men from the settlement discovered what had happened. Their leader, Victor Blackwood, was furious. He had built his power by making people afraid of him, and Caleb's actions had challenged everything he stood for. He ordered his men to search every trail, every road, and every nearby town. They wanted Caleb captured. They wanted Evelyn returned. But neither of them intended to go back. The journey across the frontier was not easy. The desert tested them with heat, cold nights, and endless miles of empty land. Their supplies were limited, and every sound in the distance made them wonder if they were being followed. At first, Evelyn and Caleb were strangers trying to survive together. Caleb was careful with his words. He was used to being alone and rarely shared his thoughts. Evelyn, meanwhile, struggled with the pain of what had happened. She had lost her home, her trust in her father, and the life she thought she knew. Some nights, she sat beside the campfire staring into the flames, wondering how someone who was supposed to love her could betray her so completely. Caleb noticed, but he never pushed her to talk. He simply sat beside her. That small act meant more than any speech could have. Over time, Evelyn began to see the man behind the quiet cowboy. One evening, while resting beside a small river, she asked him why he helped her. Caleb looked across the water before answering. "Years ago, someone helped me when I had nothing. I never forgot what that meant." Evelyn realized there was pain hidden behind his calm expression. Slowly, Caleb began sharing pieces of his past. He told her about losing his family and the loneliness that followed. He explained that after tragedy took away everything he loved, he decided it was safer to travel alone. "No good comes from getting attached," he admitted. Evelyn looked at him. "That's not true." Caleb gave a small smile. "You believe that?" "I do," she replied. "Because if you believed it, you wouldn't have come back for me." Her words stayed with him. For the first time in years, Caleb began questioning the walls he had built around himself. And Evelyn began discovering something important about herself. She was not weak. She was not broken. She was a survivor. During their journey, she proved it again and again. She helped find safe paths through the wilderness, repaired clothing, managed supplies, and even saved Caleb when he became injured after a dangerous encounter on the trail. Caleb admired her courage. He had rescued her from chains, but he realized she had been saving him in ways he never expected. She reminded him that life was not only about surviving pain. It was also about finding something worth living for. Eventually, they reached a small frontier community where Caleb knew a few trustworthy people. An older rancher named Samuel Reed offered them shelter until they could decide their next move. For the first time in months, Evelyn experienced peace. She wore a simple frontier dress, helped around the ranch, and laughed again. The sound surprised her because she had almost forgotten what happiness felt like. Caleb watched her from a distance. The woman he first found standing in chains was now standing in the sunlight, rebuilding herself piece by piece. But their peace did not last. One evening, a rider arrived with news. Victor Blackwood's men had found their trail. They were coming, and they were not coming for forgiveness. They wanted revenge. Caleb knew they could not hide forever. The past they were running from had finally caught up with them. But this time, Evelyn was not alone. And Caleb was no longer fighting only for himself. As the sun disappeared behind the Arizona mountains, the two stood together outside the ranch house, preparing for whatever came next. Evelyn looked at Caleb. "Do you regret saving me?" Caleb looked at the woman who had changed his life. No. For the first time in years, he meant it completely. Because saving Evelyn Hartwell had not ruined his life. It had given him one worth fighting for. The Arizona sunrise arrived quietly over the small frontier ranch, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. For most people, it was just another morning in the unforgiving wilderness. But for Evelyn Hartwell and Caleb Walker, it was the beginning of a final battle for the life they had fought so hard to build. They both knew Victor Blackwood and his men were coming. The past they had escaped was finally catching up with them. But this time, Evelyn was not the frightened woman who had been dragged away from her home. She was no longer the woman standing alone in chains while an entire town looked away. She was a woman who had survived betrayal, a woman who had crossed the desert, a woman who had discovered her own strength. And she was ready to protect the freedom she had earned. Caleb spent the morning preparing the ranch, checking supplies, and making sure the people who had offered them shelter would be safe. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. Years ago, he would have fought only for himself. He would have walked away from anyone else's problems. But Evelyn had changed him. She reminded him that a person's life was not measured by how much pain they could endure alone. It was measured by the courage they found to stand beside others. When Victor Blackwood finally arrived with his men, he expected to find the same fear he had always created. He believed money and power made him untouchable. But the town was different now. The people who once stayed silent were ready to speak. They had seen what happened when they allowed powerful men to control their lives. Evelyn's courage had reminded them that fear only survived when everyone accepted it. Victor stepped forward, looking at Evelyn with anger. "You don't belong here," he said. The old Evelyn might have lowered her eyes. The old Evelyn might have stayed silent. But that woman was gone. Evelyn stepped forward calmly. "I belong wherever I choose to stand." Her voice was steady. The entire town heard her. She told them everything. She told them how her father's gambling destroyed her family. She told them how she was treated as a debt instead of a person. She told them how men who claimed to have power believed they could decide another person's future. But she also told them something more important. "They took my freedom once," Evelyn said. "But they never took who I was." Her words affected everyone listening. For the first time, the people of the settlement saw Evelyn not as a victim, but as a survivor. During the confrontation, evidence against Victor Blackwood was revealed. Records from the gambling hall, stolen agreements, and testimony from people who had been afraid to speak finally exposed his crimes. His control over the region began to collapse. The same people who once feared him now stood against him. Victor realized too late that his greatest mistake was believing people could never find their courage. The authorities eventually arrived, and Victor and his men were forced to answer for their actions. Their reign of fear came to an end, leaving the frontier town with a chance to rebuild. But one final wound remained. Thomas Hartwell returned. Evelyn's father had spent months carrying the weight of what he had done. He had lost his ranch, his reputation, and the trust of his daughter. When he finally stood before Evelyn, he was no longer the proud man who believed money could fix everything. He looked broken. "I was wrong," Thomas said. Evelyn stared at him silently. For years, she had imagined this moment. She had imagined anger. She had imagined demanding answers. But standing there, she realized something. She no longer needed him to admit her worth. She already knew it. "I hope you find peace," she told him. "But I cannot let your mistakes become my future." Thomas lowered his head, knowing there was nothing he could say to undo the damage. Evelyn walked away. Not because she hated him, because she finally chose herself. Months passed, and the ranch slowly transformed into a place of hope. Evelyn and Caleb built a new life together far from the memories of the old settlement. The woman who had once been treated as property became known throughout the territory as someone with incredible strength and compassion. She helped struggling families, welcomed travelers, and created a home where people felt safe. Caleb changed too. The lonely cowboy who once believed he was destined to walk alone found something he never expected. A reason to stay, a place to belong, and someone who understood him completely. Their love did not happen because Caleb rescued Evelyn. It happened because they saved each other. One evening, as the sun lowered behind the mountains, Caleb and Evelyn stood together overlooking their ranch. The wind moved gently across the fields, and for a moment, the painful memories of the past felt far away. Caleb looked at her. "When I found you, I thought I was saving your life." Evelyn smiled. "And now?" He looked toward the home they had built. "Now I know you saved mine too." Evelyn placed her hand in his. The chains that once held her were gone forever. The fear that once followed Caleb had finally disappeared. They were no longer running from the past. They were building the future. Years later, people across the Arizona territory would tell the story of the woman who was gambled away and the cowboy who refused to leave her behind. But the truth was even greater than the legend. Evelyn Hartwell was never defined by the chains placed around her. She was defined by the courage that broke them. And Caleb Walker was never just the lonely cowboy who saved her. He was the man who found a home when he stopped running from love. Together, they proved that even in the harshest corners of the frontier, kindness could defeat cruelty, hope could rise from heartbreak, and a second chance could become the greatest adventure of all.